Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Welcome to the Encounter program, sponsored by the Broome County Council of Churches. I'm Mark Kimpland. I'm the pastor at the Endwell United Methodist Church. I'm glad you've joined us today. Throughout the next few months, we're going to share a few programs and talk and welcome and listen to and hear from some new pastors in the area in Broome County. If you are not aware, July 1st in the United Methodist tradition is the time that United Methodist pastors, if they are reassigned or reappointed to different churches, they begin the process on July 1st. So we're going to meet some of these pastors over the next few months. But today, I am thrilled to have with us the new pastor at the High Street United Methodist Church, Ben O'Connor. Ben, welcome to the Encounter program.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
And welcome to Broome County.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
I remember being where you are about 3 years ago and sharing a little bit about who I was and such things. And so why don't we start there with a little bit about Ben O'Connor. Why don't you, kind of a jump ball, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
So I am the son of two United Methodist pastors, so this is the sort of a family tradition, I guess. And I grew up bouncing around all over upstate New York before graduating and going to school to become a history teacher. And in that whole process, I got married, had a daughter, and found that teaching wasn't quite working out for me, and I had run away from a calling when I was about 16, calling to the ministry, and I was like, well, maybe this is God telling me that you can't run anymore. And so I started that whole process, and my wife at the time and I had some difficulties and ended up getting divorced, I met my current wife a couple years later. We both went to seminary together. My wife Laurel is on track to be a deacon at some point in the United Methodist Church, and that's not someone who serves in a church, but someone who serves in the world. And so she and I are hoping to sort of work together at some point. And we just celebrated the birth of our son Tim, who thank you, who is 6 months last Friday, and he just had his 6-month checkup today, and all is good.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's. Can you kind of share a little bit of your spiritual journey? I know a little bit about your background and such things. We've kind of moved in similar spheres and such things. But tell me about your spiritual journey. What's brought you here to Broome County, and how did you get here?
Well, it's a very interesting. It's an interesting tale because my story starts at camp. It doesn't start at church, even though I was raised in the church. At some point in your life, you have to say, well, I do want to follow Jesus. And for me, it was at camp. I was about 8 or 9 years old at Aldersgate up in the Adirondacks, and I was out in a wilderness area with the camp that I was attending, and we were taking care of each other, and I had this realization, like we're like 9 kids who didn't know each other 2 days ago, and now we're cooking for each other, we're cleaning for each other, and all this. And I'm like, that's God, right? That's got to be God, right? Because we don't know each other, and now we're working together. And so I'm like, this is what I definitely want to continue this and strengthen this. And came back from camp and started to get involved a lot in my church, in the church that my mom and dad were serving, and we started to feel called into ministry, and was like, let's do this. And then at 16, I started to notice that maybe that's not what I wanted to do, because there was a lot of frustrated nights. My parents would come home and be, it's not easy to lead people. It's not easy to lead the church. And I'm like, maybe that's not what I want. And so I went off, and I was going to be an astronaut, and then I was going to be a music teacher, and eventually settled on social studies. But I grew a lot even in my time away from the church, because I didn't just like walk away from a calling. I walked away from the church entirely, and I grew a lot in believe it or not, from watching Star Wars, from watching Doctor Who, from watching being in pop culture and seeing where God was outside, out in the world, and not just in the four walls of the church. Sure. And so I grew and I grew and I grew, and by the time I was 23, I really was like, I need to go back. Like this is God calling me back into community with other Christians, and because it is incredibly important to do that and to be in community. You can't, in my opinion, you can't be Christian without others. And so I started going back to church, and that's when I really started to feel the calling back. Once again into you're supposed to be in the ministry. You're supposed to be in the ministry, and talked with my pastor, talked with my DS, and the ball sort of started to roll, and I've been serving for 3 years, and got a call from the bishop, and he said, I got this church in Binghamton.
And here I am. And here we are. Yeah. Now, give me a backdrop of your education and such things. You graduated from Fulton High School,
from Fulton High School, with a full Regents diploma, and then I went to OCC, Onondaga Community College. I studied music for a year, and the fun of music was sucked out in the studying of it. And I'm like, well, I want it to be fun. Let me go find something else to do. And I actually flirted with political science for a little bit. I'm like, I could be the president of the United States. And no, I can't. My morals are too high. Oops. But then ended up like, I'm going to be a social studies teacher. That was my second favorite subject, and it's what I was best at in school. And I love it because it's more than just names and dates. There's psychology and anthropology and on all the study of people, and that's and the study of people has really helped me in this in what I'm doing now. And I look at everything historically. I look at everything psychologically, anthropologically, and it's been getting from being a history teacher, or even from a music background to being a pastor. Everything has sort of been like, well, I have a little bit of knowledge in just about everything that happens in a church, and that's they say a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, and so I like to think that I'm doing okay. I'm able to at least put a little bit of input into each area and help folks in their spirituality, help people grow, and then help the church grow.
Awesome. Say a little bit more about your calling. I too had, we very similar. I was a junior in high school, and I kind of felt a tug on my heart. Can you share that tug?
Yeah.
Can you share that?
Well, it was this. I always felt at home inside the church. It was where I felt the most warmth, and I used to live next to the church, and I felt more at home next door in the pews. I used to hang around in the pulpit after church, or during the week when no one else was around. And I'm like, I could do this, and but when the people side of it sort of came out, I'm like, maybe not. But I started to feel this constant tug of, after I left the church, just this tug back, like, you should be here. You are this person who is destined to lead, or destined to be someone who helps and shepherds those who are on this struggle, in this journey. And for me, the turning point was actually my father's death when I was 20, and it was rough. It was 3 years of me yelling at God, going, you called me to something, and then you take away the one person, one of the two people that I really need in this, but God's like, well, yeah, but that's life. Death is one of those things that's always going to happen, and we're all facing these struggles, and who better to, you've now experienced this, and now you can help others get through that. And oh yeah. And then I had this, what we in the Methodist church called an Aldersgate moment, where my heart was strangely warmed. And I was sitting in my car at a stoplight after having bought a TV mount for my flat screen TV. And it was this, what are you doing? Like, you're not supposed to be, stuck in traffic doing TV. Like, you should be out there leading. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And it didn't go away. And I called my mom, and she's like, that's a calling, Ben. That's what this is. You should come have lunch with me tomorrow so we can talk about it. And it was just before the clergy, it was during the clergy session of annual conference, and she's like, oh, hey, come to lunch. And she was the district superintendent at the time. And so we go to the restaurant, and sitting around the table that we were at was the rest of the district superintendents who were like, I have a church for you over here in I'm like, it's been a day, folks. Like, give me a break. I'm like, well, no, we see it. Like, it's been obvious. You've grown up around us. We know what's going on. Sure. It was just a matter of time. Yeah. And so it took a couple of years for me to get everything in order. I had to figure out how to take care of my daughter, how to straighten out some financial stuff to get into seminary. And I met my wife, who I feel is just as strong a part of my call as I am. Sure. And without her, I don't think I could do what I do. Yes. So that she was that final piece, and we went to school together and graduated a year ago, and have been going strong since.
Awesome. Let's talk. It's very evident. You're on the young side. That's a plus. That is wonderful. Tell me how does your age, your life experiences and all of that, how does that affect the way you approach ministry, what you do, especially in these times where the average United Methodist parishioner sitting in the pew is nearing about 60 years old, and you're not that.
No.
So tell me how that affects your ministry.
Well, unless my son is with me, I'm the youngest person in the room, almost like without having to ask anybody. So it's. I say this with a grain of salt, but my naivete is probably my biggest or my strongest. I don't know what happens when we do this, and so I'm going to ask the questions and get some like, well, we tried this at one point, and I'm like, oh, okay, but it's also, well, why can't we try it again? Maybe it didn't work that time, and I can push a little bit to stretch people in new ways, because I don't know what works and what doesn't work, and I'm at a point where I like to think I have enough energy to just let's do it, let's try it and see what happens. Yes. And so I may have moved some pews at a church that I served before, and because they weren't bolted down, I'm like, well, if they're not bolted down, let's move them and have some fun with this. And for a couple of weeks when they were moved, the church was like, oh, this is different. We've never done something like this before, and it was just this, I've seen the 60, 70, 80-year-olds feed off of energy that I'm giving off, just because I'm bouncing around and jumping around, and I'm very kinetic in my preaching. I don't stand behind the pulpit. I get out and I walk and I move around, and people are feeding off of that energy, and it just lifts up worship. It lifts up the work that people want to do. Like, oh yeah, we should go out, and I think that it is great to be a young pastor, just because I don't know what's going on, and I can be like, oh yeah, I'm not quite as jaded I'm a little bit more jaded than some younger pastors, but I'm not as jaded as someone who's been banging their head against the wall for 30, 40 years. But I'm fresh and ready to go, and it's just I love being a pastor and working with people, and my age is also can be a difficult thing. Again, it's also that naivete where people are looking at me going, well, that's cute, or I'm their grandson's age or their granddaughter's age, and they're like, okay, that's cute. I look at that and I say, well, what do I'm saying this. let's go and let's try something. Let's try something to get your grandkids in, to get people who are my age in. And I don't speak for everybody my age, but I do have I like to think I have my finger on the pulse of some folks my age. Sure. And that's something I think I bring to churches and communities, is that people look and see, oh, there's someone who looks like me, and so I do have that. I'm not a silver bullet. I'm not. They're not just going to come because I'm there, but they're going to say, well, maybe we can try something.
Yeah.